Welcome everyone to IPDAE's Webinar Wednesday. I'm June Rull, and I'm so happy that all of you could join us today as we have a discussion on the implementation of evidence-based adult education retention strategies. Facilitating our webinar today are Drs. Lori Lee and Kevin Smith. They're with the Regional Educational Laboratory Southeast. And Dr. Smith is the Research Alliance Manager for the Florida Career Readiness Research Alliance. Together, they provide support on evidence-based practices for literacy and career readiness across Florida and several other southeastern states. Today, you'll also have the opportunity to hear from local practitioners from Broward, Hillsborough, and Pinellas County, as they share retention implementation steps they've taken in their programs to ensure students are completing their programs with success. Excuse me. Before we get started, I want to briefly go over some things to remember. Remember that if you have a question, you may type it into the Q&A option and just hit the send button. All of your microphones are muted and you will be in listen-only mode. Today's presentation is recorded and it will be available within 48 hours on the IPDAE website. So Kevin and Lori, I'm going to turn it over to you and we're going to get the webinar started. Thank you again for joining us.
Perfect. Thanks so much, June, and to IPDAE for being wonderful partners in this work, along with our partners in our districts who are going to share with you today. As June mentioned, my name is Dr. Kevin Smith, and I work with Regional Educational Laboratory Southeast, and we've been very pleased to work with the Florida Department of Education, IPDAE, and local school districts in addressing evidence-based practices for retention and persistence in adult education across the state of Florida over the past year and a half or so. So a few things we wanted to talk about from the research before we talk about practitioner practices. We know that researchers in the field have noted that a lot of important decisions, and this just isn't in adult education, it's in education in general, are based on opinion, prior experience, and trial and error. And advisors and researchers in adult education note that practitioners may need coaching to become better consumers of research and active partners in helping connect research to practice. And that's a big part that Lori and I play in our role, is trying to ensure that the evidence base from research makes it into practice. And we're both former teachers and have worked with educators for decades and are very pleased to be able to share with you some of the research and things that we know can work to help improve particularly persistence in adult education. So what we wanted to start with briefly is just defining persistence. So Dr. John Cummings, who is the foremost expert in the idea of retention and persistence and one of the earliest researchers on that field in adult education, he defines it as having two parts. The first part of persistence is intensity. How many hours of instruction the student actually comes and attends per month, and then duration. How many months do they engage or persist in instruction? Typically, programs report out persistence rates as hours of instruction during a certain number of months and typically in a year. And that's what the Department of Education here would view as your persistence rate, looking at hours over a year. Adult education programs often refer to persistence as retention, and they measure it again by student participation in formal sessions. So I like his definition of persistence because he really says that persistence, his definition of it is adults staying in programs for as long as they can, and when they can't, engaging in self-directed study or distance education when they have to stop. And we all know all those factors that lead to students stopping adult education. I mean, this year, heavens, there have been so many challenges for our students, but again, many have persisted in spite of all that. And you have done an incredible job ensuring that students have been able to persist in adult education despite the challenges. So again, I like the end of what he states too, when their lives allow coming back to it in a more, formalized capacity. So that's a little bit about persistence in adult education. So a little bit about who are our persisters. I just wanted to share, this study was led by Liz Ty, who's a professor at Georgia State and has been involved with us in this work as well. She did a pretty significant mixed method study looking at what the markers for adult education success in terms of persistence were. And this study was actually based in Florida. So the four takeaways that she had from that study was the first, making sure that teachers know evidence-based instructional strategies and know how to implement those, that they know best practice in working with adult learners. That was key and it was critical to success. Strong teacher-student interactions. And what she said, and I've heard from many other adult education researchers, you have to make a good connection with students within the first 3 weeks of instruction, or there's a good chance they're not going to stick around. Third, their views on standardized assessment and using data to inform instruction and track student growth. So adult students in particular, instruction needs to meet them where they are, and they need to be able to track their own progress, and the teachers need to work with them in tracking the progress. Because adults in particular, if they don't think they're making progress, if they're not being successful toward their goals, they're not going to stick around. And then the fourth piece, the ability of the program to tap into student motivational factors. So figuring out, why is the student coming? Why are they here? Why are they in adult education? Is it to enhance their abilities in their job, to be promoted for a job? Is it for family purposes, to help their children, to integrate in society, to learn language better? All those are potential motivational factors. So whatever the instructor can do to ensure that they know what the students' motivational factors are and try to address those through instruction, it's going to be beneficial. So I'm going to turn over to Lori for a few moments.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is Lori Lee from REL Southeast, and it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. We're going to take a little bit of time and delve a little bit more deeply into some of these practices that the Liz Ty research revealed to us as being effective in cultivating that student persistence. And the first one of those is teacher-student interactions. And this certainly will come as no surprise to any of you, but we want to make sure that those interactions are indeed intentional and that they are happening within our classrooms. The first sentence of that first paragraph, one characteristic consistently differentiated effective classrooms from less effective ones, whether students stated that their teachers were vital to their success. That pretty much sums it up. So our teachers are more than instructors of content. What happens here is that teachers build relationships with their students. And this is really important in the field of adult learning. And so when those relationships are established, then students are more likely to persist. They will keep coming if their teacher cares about them, if their teacher shows interest in them, if they establish those relationships. In the next paragraph, you see some characteristics of any good teacher. Effective teachers were described as being knowledgeable, encouraging, supportive, approachable, and accessible. Whether you teach kindergarten or 8th grade or adults, all of these kinds of characteristics are definitely those of good teachers. That's what we do as teachers. And so likewise, these kinds of characteristics help demonstrate to students that we care about them and that we want them to persist and that we will do what we can to help them. And so very important characteristics of our teachers. And then towards the end of that same paragraph, what's mentioned there are the types of things that really are indicative of becoming a mentor. So helping those students set goals, helping them recognize how to overcome obstacles in their lives, helping them to understand that they are valuable as people. All of those things are really helpful in establishing those relationships with students, and those interactions are critical to helping students to persist in their education. So next, on the next slide here, we're going to look a little bit about at student motivational factors and goal setting. And so here we see one of the most important things that a teacher can do is help students to perhaps form goals, because they may come to a program and really not have a clear understanding of exactly what they want to do. They know that they want to get a better job to support their family. They know that they want to further their education, but they may not have a clear understanding in themselves of what that involves or exactly what they want to accomplish. And so as teachers, really helping those students to form goals to begin with, and then to lay out a plan for attaining those goals, recognizing that they may change throughout the course of the program. Students may come in with one thought and then move to something else, and that's absolutely okay. And the thought here is, as we help students set those goals, we need to involve other people. So it's not just the teacher and the student, but it's involving counselors. It's thinking about what kinds of assessments need to take place in order for students to obtain those credentials that they're interested in attaining. What about different kinds of trades? Do students know what kinds of jobs are available in the area? What kind of financial aid is available? And not just financial aid that might cover things like tuition, but what about the books? What about uniforms? What about specific tools that might be needed? Is there financial aid that will help them with those kinds of things? And finding the people that we can connect students to that can help them to formulate their goals, to work through that plan to attain those particular goals. And so it's a matter of helping students individually, and also connecting to those people that will be valuable resources to help those students as well as they work towards those particular goals.
Thanks so much, Lori. And thanks for the question as well. As questions come in, we have a Q&A section that we'll do at the end. So please continue to add questions. So thanks for that. A little bit about using data for placement and tracking growth. So we know, again, that retention and persistence should focus on ensuring that students are engaged toward their advancement success, especially if they have previous negative attitudes toward education in general. Many times, not always, but in many cases, adult education students may not have been successful in their previous educational attempts. So working to address those negative attitudes can also help. And in doing so, one thing that can really be beneficial is all the way at intake and orientation, go ahead and share, and there are many tools out there to do this, goal setting, so that you're matching students with classes and coursework most closely based with their needs. And again, I've mentioned this briefly before, if a student doesn't feel that they're getting a benefit from instruction within the first 3 weeks, there's a good chance that they're not going to stick around. So ensuring, again, that they're connected, that they have goals, that the instructor understands their goals and the program understands their goals, and that they're working to address those student goals within the first 3 weeks. That's really important. Then ensuring, again, that students are able to track and see their progress along with the instructors, especially for adults, is important. And again, hopefully using valid and reliable assessments. That can really be helpful for persistence as well. We also know that, of course, choosing the interventions themselves or curricula that's going to best meet your students' needs, that has an evidence base, can be important as well. So just thinking about what that selection process looks like. Is there a rubric that's in place for your program within your district, within your college, to say, this is how we select our programs. This is the thoughtful process we go through to ensure that the instructional materials that are provided for our students are going to meet their needs. So that's one thing, again, that can also help ensure that you have evidence-based instructional strategies and materials and that they're implemented effectively. And of course, that's something else that's going to be beneficial. What I'll also say in turning this back over to Lori is that there are ways to incorporate these pieces into persistence plans.
Thank you, Kevin. And so now we want to think about developing a persistence plan. And we know that the literature shares with us that persistence plans can be really helpful. Having something that is formal, that's written down as a document, can be helpful in assisting students as they work towards their goals. And there are 3 characteristics of good persistence plans that are there. And this melds really nicely in what I'm going to share on the next slide. So keep that in mind as we talk about these 3 things. And so the first one there is that the persistence plan should reflect that the program is designed to help students like them reach their goals. And so as that persistence plan is completed, students should see that. They shouldn't help, they can't help but see that the program is there in order to help them. And then secondly, the program is flexible enough that they can be accommodated if something happens, if their goals change, if their schedule changes, if there are adjustments that need to be made, that it's clear that this is not a plan or a document that is set in stone, but you've heard the other documents referred to as if this is a living document. Well, this is like that. This is a living document. We can make changes along the way. That is absolutely fine. And so it should be a document that reflects the growth of the student. So as their goals change, perhaps the persistence plan changes. If there are schedules that change, that's reflected in the persistence plan and so forth. And then finally, that last characteristic there is there's some criteria for measuring that persistence. And this is important to the program. It's also important to the student. So looking at the number of hours of attendance, looking at the student achievement, the goal attainment, those steps along the way that they are progressing through to meet their final goal, and then improve completion rates. They actually accomplish, they finish that certificate, they go on to that next step, whatever it is. So that criteria, as I shared, that's important to the student because the student needs to see his or her progress. They need to see, in some regard, it's an accountability kind of thing for them. And then the programs also need to see that that continuance of effort as well, and ensuring that the persistence plan is being effective for that particular student. So those characteristics are those of that were deemed to be beneficial in regard to formulating a persistence plan. And so as we move to this next slide, you think about what we just talked about and how those kinds of things can be integrated into the structure of the program itself. And so as we think about the fact that the program is designed to help the student, and then we think about our recruitment methods, our intake and orientation procedures. Is it apparent that the programs are designed to help the student when you're recruiting, when you're going through that intake and orientation process? And then thinking about what kinds of assessment tools are going to provide students and teachers with the information that they need in order to help students attain their goals. And think about what we talked about in regard to the flexibility there that needs to be available to students if their goals change. And so assessment tools may need to change as well. And so that also is evidenced in the structure of the program. And then the fact that programs and teachers establish strategies for formally recognizing student achievement. And so thinking about that criteria we established in that persistence plan, we need to celebrate the fact that the student accomplishes those steps along the way. And when he or she finally does attain that certificate, meets their goal, becomes employed in that field, whatever it may be, we need to make sure that in our programs, we are incorporating these kinds of things in order to cultivate persistence in our students. So I'll turn it right back over to Kevin. Oh, no, I won't. Actually, I'm turning it over to Brian Bush from Broward County. Good. Hello, Brian. Thank you for sharing today.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and take part. I'm glad that I can share the work that we've done in Broward County so far. And we are in the very initial stages of implementing a plan thanks to the research that Dr. Smith and Dr. Lee are presenting. We are a very big district, and in the first slide, you'll see that some of the challenges that we're facing as a big district include, trying to figure out how to get everybody moving in the same direction at the same time. We definitely, part of this is implementing change, and change is always difficult no matter what that change is. And what we don't want to do is, in a district this size, we probably don't have somebody managing decisions and implementations on this type of level for all of the workforce schools to come together and decide and implement. And even if we did, we wouldn't want to be implementing something because somebody at the top told us to do it. You really want to try and collaborate and get all the players to do this or take this action because we believe it's what's best for students, not because it's a requirement. We don't want anyone checking the box and then going back to doing what they think is best. One of the best books that I've read about implementing change is Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, and they talk about the elephant and the rider. And when you're talking about change, the elephant will represent the emotion of the change, and the rider is the rational reasons for the change. So, really, you got to get the elephant moving, because if the rational reasons of moving that elephant or trying to get that elephant to go in any direction, if we don't have emotion behind it, you're not going to get anywhere. So the emotion of this situation, everyone in this field is doing it because they believe in what's best for students. So that's actually really the easy part, to tap into that and trying to sell that pitch. And we're doing it because every single student matters, and the students that struggle the most, that might be the least resilient and ready to not persist, they're going to also be the same ones that need the most interventions in the strategic planning in order to do that. To continue to talk about collaborative and collective decision making, we always hear somebody say, yeah, I have no problem collaborating. That's easy as long as everyone listens to all of my ideas. And that's where the problem and the challenge really comes in, because everybody has great ideas, and that's what makes collaborating hard. You really want to make sure that you're not spending your time jockeying for position on who has the best idea, or from a standpoint of 8 schools coming together. Each school and each program is going to have what's been working for them. So they don't want to let that go, but really finding a way, to combine those ideas and come up with what the best idea is going to be as a group, because then everybody has ownership in it, they're invested in it, they're a part of it. But we also know the bigger the group, that some people just shy away from the conversation, and we want to get them involved. So when you start talking about which of these research-based strategies you want to implement and you want to adopt, really trying to set forth with a protocol where those that are shy or reluctant participants get an opportunity to chip in and chime in with their ideas, because a lot of times they have the best ideas, and we want to make sure that they are invested as well, and that their ideas are shared. And they get a chance to go ahead and, sometimes we avoid this because it's the hard work of collaboration, and it's going to be time consuming, but it'll pay off in the end. Once you start going, one of the hardest parts about coming up with a plan too is anytime we talk about change, there's a deficit mindset. Think of the example if your kid brings home a report card and there's 3 A's, 2 B's, and an F. Where does your mind go immediately? You look at the F and you look at the problem, and you start talking about how to fix it. And what you want to do is you want to honor your bright spots. You want to consider the things that you're doing well, and you want to highlight that. There's multiple types of feedback. There's critical feedback, and then there's coaching feedback. So we want to honor, and we want to understand and recognize the things that you're doing that are good, that are great, but we want to say we're at close to the top of the mountain. We're getting there. What we're doing is good, but we can do this even better. So we don't want to throw everything away that's been done. We're not talking about changing it because it hasn't been working. But immediately when you start talking to your teachers about forming and building relationships, they'll start sharing the things that they're doing, referring and calling students by name, asking about their goals, taking time to talk to them and greet them when they enter the classroom, celebrating their birthdays. All of those things are great, but maybe not so much in isolation, and really getting to a point where you're go ahead and you're going to collaborate and you're going to include those and come up with a strategic plan where you're not hoping they're occurring in some classrooms, thinking they're occurring in most classrooms, but what's really happening is it's occurring at a different level depending on each individual person, unless you have a strategic approach and plan to put these things in motion. Now, when we talk about getting past some of those challenges and starting to implement what strategies we want to hold on to based on the research that's being presented today, the big and primary one is build connections with students. And we're not just talking about teachers at this point. Every single person on your campus is representing your program and the benefits and the future for these students. So at the point of entry to your campus, clerical, registrars, testers, advisors, there really needs to be a customer satisfaction mindset that you're always exceeding expectations and doing everything that you can to please and connect with these students. You want to make sure that this became even more difficult through the pandemic. We weren't seeing the students as much in person, so making those connections from a distance just required a little bit more intentionality and strategy to it. When students call your campus, really try to avoid student hot potato. And what I mean by that is, they call and instead of taking that issue and taking whatever that student needs as assistance, you pass the student on to the next person. And sometimes we heard stories of a student being passed 3-4 times before they got a resolution to what they need. So taking their information, finding the right person that's able to help that student, and then getting back in contact with the student rather than telling the student who they need to call next. We implemented some remote registration processes. One of the things that really helps us connect with the students and really helped us connect to more students was implementing a virtual orientation. And this wasn't a recorded orientation. This is something that is conducted synchronous and live multiple times a week at different times of the day so that more students can access it and tap into it. And there was some discussion whether this would be done remotely or recorded. And instead of doing the recording, we really thought it was important to be able to answer each student's individual questions that may come up and may differ from the single recording that would have been implemented otherwise. So we thought that was a really good one. And then, creating teacher welcome letters where the students aren't going to be walking into the class as much as they were before. So really finding a way upon registration, this is me, these are my interests, this is what you'll be learning in my class. And it's not just the class syllabus, but it gives some personal information to, connect that student with the teacher and those personal teacher moments. The next strategy that we were connecting with in Broward is really finding a way to conduct some goal setting and a cost benefit analysis and using those in tandem at our intake processes. And as you all know in this webinar, that our students often come to us and they say, I'm here to learn English, or I'm here to get my GED, to earn my high school diploma. And the storm in their lives that surround them on a day-to-day basis make it very, very difficult to see past that next obstacle. That obstacle's in their way. They know that they're not going to be able to get the job they want because they're not speaking English as proficiently as they want. So that's really the primary and only goal that they see at the time. And it's up to us to, have those conversations with them that allow them to set the higher goal, the long-term goal. And just the process of having that conversation at intake helps build that connection, which was our first strategy that we wanted to implement, set that secondary goal, and then connect the cost benefit analysis that's going to go along with that if they continue beyond the adult general needs. And then the final strategy that we're implementing and taking on is you'll see in the last slide that I have here for Broward is the clear connections between classroom learning and student goals. And this is really a way where it's our opportunity to connect the dots and contextualize for their career goals. You know, I hate to say it, but I've seen classrooms where, you know, you're having a multicultural party and students are bringing in, you know, foods from their countries, and we're doing virtual field trips, and not to throw those out and discredit them, because those things could possibly build student relationships, but, you know, really valuing the time of our students, having a sense of urgency in the curriculum that we're delivering, and really trying to connect the dots where they can understand the content that we're covering in class is going to be contextualized to my long-term goals. It's going to have an objective that's going to help me learn my academic and my career skills. And it's going to be delivered through an activity that's going to help the students develop some of those workforce skills at the same time. It perfectly aligns with the shift in adult education in Florida right now, where we are having a more concentrated effort and sense of urgency to include consistent workforce contextualization across all subjects and at all levels, and really looking at developing some of these integrated education and training programs. So we're kind of combining multiple objectives in one approach here. And, you know, we're still in the process, like I said earlier, of planning and trying to collaborate and figure out how we can implement these across all 8 workforce schools simultaneously. But that's the part that we're looking forward to. And we have some people on the webinar from Broward. They can attest to it's not easy work, and we've been spending a lot of time collaborating throughout the year, and really looking forward to see what some of our results are. And as you hear from Ron and Ann in the next couple of segments, they have a little bit further along in the implementation process than we are, and you'll get to see how that's working out for them. And thank you again for all the time that you gave for me.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm very impressed with what you guys have done in Broward County. I'm here to share about what we are doing in Hillsborough County, and we do have some of our staff and teachers that are also tuned in from Hillsborough County here. We are making these, we've learned so much from Kevin and Lori's multiple workshops. All in all, they've done 4 sets of workshops throughout the span of 2020 and 2021 school year. And we have taken it into heart, and we're now incorporating all of the learning that we have into the upcoming changes for the 21-22 school year, through our also reflected in our consolidated AFLA, IELCE, AGE grant application for the upcoming year. And one of the things that we are going to make significant changes in data collection, because one of the implementation items that Lori and Kevin has shared with us is the development and use of the student data profile. What we've discovered is what we currently collect in Hillsborough County is not sufficient to fully and holistically plan for the career pathway of that student. So instead of revising the form, we're adding an extra anecdotal sheet where the counselor or whoever is interacting with the student at the registration or intake step, that they're collecting in-depth information about the student's goal and why they wanted to sign up for adult education. We're also making some changes in the way we counsel students, and we're allowing for individual and also collaborative counseling as suggested by Kevin and Lori in their implementation suggestion. We're also making changes to our orientation because we realize that there are going to be challenges in the upcoming year as we offer more modalities for instruction, such as in-person, fully virtual, and also a hybrid model. So as we have each of these modalities of course offerings, we are going to plan for how does the orientation look like and what content of information is necessary for students to have so that they will just slide right in with all of the necessary tools, resources, and information they need to participate in our program. So we're incorporating those changes into our programming and program offering, which is, I think, section I of the RFP. We're also incorporating instructional methods and materials, which is another item from the research that Kevin and Lori did, is that we're incorporating a more in-depth instructional research-based practices into the way we conduct professional development with our teacher, specifically focusing on career pathway, incorporating career readiness, and most importantly, the newest and hottest off the press this year are integrated in education and training platforms. So those three are going to be the drivers of professional development, which is also in line with development and use of student data profiles. I also wanted to say that we are making some changes into teacher preparation and training, because as we moved into a hybrid from face-to-face to fully virtual to combinations of virtual and hybrid, we realized that teacher preparation, teacher induction, and professional development should also change and should also look different. So we're making the following changes in the teacher preparation and training to be more in line and to emphasize district priorities, which is in line with the goals of the AFLA grant. Last but not the least, I mentioned to you that we are doing and making a lot of changes with our career pathways readiness in adult education. Because we are going to initiate several integrated education and training programs, we are also making some changes in the way we are programming the student into these integrated education and program, making sure that students are fully aware of these programs, and we eliminate every possible barrier to participation in the program, such as financial assistance. And also we're looking into making a more in-depth, individualized learning plan to hammer down on specific basic skills that students may struggle as they participate into our IET program. Last but not the least, career readiness element number 3 that Kevin and Lori indicated in our training, which is relevant course material, is in line with our IET program, making sure that the instruction that is happening in the classroom is contextualized to the career technical or credit program that they are taking side by side in these IET programs. A lot of these information that Kevin and Lori shared with us have been super, super duper useful in the draft and writing of our RFP response to the 2021 consolidated grant application. Just wanted to say that our county really truly enjoyed all of our administrators, teachers, and staff have taken into heart all of the suggestions, and we're creating an individualized plan for each of the sites, because every site is not going to be the same and they serve a different demographic. So we're developing that for each individual site to be in line with these research-based retention strategies. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Thanks, Ron. It's really timely, and I'm going to explain why. When REL came in, we were really ready for them to come. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. About 2 years ago, we started talking about recruitment and retention. I think probably everybody in the state's aware that we've been experiencing a decline in enrollment across the state, and probably across the country. Gone are the days when you could just open a classroom and have throngs of waiting and anxious students clamoring for services. So our first focus was trying to come up with some recruitment strategies to get the students in the door. This was back in 2019. We do have a district-wide training in our district every fall and spring. So this was our spring and our fall. For 2019, we started talking about recruitment. We actually formed a marketing committee and with teacher representatives, administrators, district level people to come up with some ideas to market our programs and recruit some new students. And they came up with just some wonderful ideas, and a couple of them included we started working with K through 12, not that we don't always, but getting targeted lists of K through 12 students that hadn't graduated, talking to K through 12 ESOL teachers about the parents of the children in their programs who might need English. Um, and just kind of reaching out that way through the schools, also to churches, community organizations, inviting them to visit our programs or to volunteer in our programs, and that was quite useful. We had a student incentivized referral program that helped bring a few in. Of course, I'm sure everybody's been doing those reminder postcards or reminder app for the students that had to stop out temporarily. We started using more social media, flyers, all sorts of great ideas. So that was the first couple of steps. We started doing the recruitment. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. So then the next thing we did was coming up on 2020, and this was actually right before we shut down for COVID. This was in February, and we were shut down by March. But we decided that we needed to bring in the teachers, and I think Brian talked about that quite a bit. Also, change is not easy ever, and I think a lot of our teachers had gotten used to the idea of they just were there, and students would just walk in the door, and it's not my job to recruit students. Well, it kind of is everybody's job to recruit students. So we said let's find out what they're doing in their classrooms, and so we did a teacher survey. We actually had 5 questions, and we grouped the teachers by and administrators by schools, and we asked each one of them to respond to 5 questions. We had over 103 teacher, administrator, coordinator responses, and we came up with 128 different ideas, strategies, instructional approaches to improve recruitment and retention best practices, because we wanted to know what was going on in the schools. Like Broward and Hillsborough, we're a large district and we're very spread out. And when you're in St. Pete and another teacher's in Tarpon, you may probably only see them at these district trainings. So we wanted to know what was going on and what we could do to share. So that's what we did. Go to the next slide. So these were 2 of the questions that we asked. And if you kind of look at them a little bit, you're going to see that they're very similar to the ideas that Lori and Kevin were sharing earlier about what helps with persistence and retention. Um, how do student registration intake procedures establish classroom and student expectations, and how are these disseminated to the students and shared with other teachers at your school? So right there, what are you doing for recruitment and intake? And we found a lot of different absolutely wonderful answers from all over the district. And then what strategies are you using to help students relieve stress, decrease self-doubt while ensuring that learning is engaging and encourages active participation? So again, that retention piece, what are we doing to help those students persist? Because if you're giving them something that they really like, they're going to keep coming, as we know. Um, the theme for this whole training, it was right around the time of the census. So our theme was every student counts. And that's a kind of a picture there of the question response that we had for each group. Next slide, please. And then these were our last 3 questions. And I want you to particularly look at the bottom one there. What processes and methods do I use to assist students to establish goals, explain standards, review their programs, and select dates for post-testing? That data piece, that goal piece, this was probably the one that we got the most responses for, because they were every classroom's doing a little something, but and you put it all together, it was pretty amazing. So it was really timely, and I think right after we had done this, we ran into Kevin and Lori. At I believe in Tallahassee, and they started talking about this study they were doing, and I'm like, wow, we're doing the same thing. So amazingly, they agreed to kind of help us, and we were able to really take some of these great ideas that we had just generated and put them into practice in the REL research study. So how timely was that? Next slide. So we had actually 4 teachers participate, and I know it says 2 ESL and 3 ABE/GED, not sure why, but it was 2 of each. And then that gave us those opportunities to put those teacher survey ideas that we had just gleaned into practice. And we got to pick our strategy, and guess which one we picked? Starting intake, orientation and instruction with goal setting, and matching students to classes and classwork based on their needs, and addressing negative attitudes towards education. I mean, this was right up our alley, right in our wheelhouse. And it was just, like I say, so timely that we were able to participate. Um, I think one of the reasons it turned out so well for us in Pinellas when we worked with REL was that we had already prepped the teachers. They were already in the mode of doing this. They'd already been talking about it. They'd been talking about it with their colleagues at their schools, as well as the other schools all over our district. So they were primed and ready to participate in something like this and put those ideas into practice. Next slide.
Sure. And thanks so much. And I just want to, again, you did a great job explaining where you were in this process, and we're such a great partner to work with. So she mentioned we had created a tool. Actually, we shared a tool that had already been created to help with data collection. And really, it's almost like a self-research study that they were able to conduct. So I just wanted to kind of follow up on the results from that. And you'll see, as Ann mentioned, the strategies listed there, the dates that they collected data, and bless her, Pinellas did not flinch at collecting data right in the heart of the most challenging fall any of us have ever experienced. They went right with it. And again, as Ann mentioned, you were primed, your whole team was ready, which is wonderful. So the dates that they started collecting data were 8/24, and they finished on 10/16 of 2020. And a couple of important pieces. So in order to conduct research, and again, the tool that was already developed does this, you want to make sure the 2 groups that you're comparing are similar. So they did have baseline equivalence, and you'll see, again, the tool calculates that. It looks at the student population who's there, the number of hours they're coming in with, and determined that the classes that they were comparing did have baseline equivalence. They were the same, basically, types of students. The effect size, again, there was confidence in that, meaning that you can be sure that if you repeat it, it should turn out the same way. So in other words, you can be sure that it should be true for other groups. If you do the same thing again, so if Ann takes this strategy, or Pinellas or any other district takes the same strategy with similar students and does the same thing, can you say that this should happen again? And the answer was yes, that it should. The effect size shows the differences in the average scores between the control group, the group that did not use this strategy, the classes that didn't use this strategy, and the experimental group, the classes that did. And the effect size was 0.97, which may not mean anything to you, but I'm going to talk about that in a second. So 0.97, again, overall, this is just a nice flow chart that shows you as you're conducting research, what would you look for? So is there an effect size? Yes, it was 0.97, which is positive. There was confidence, which I've already mentioned, yes. So that suggests, again, that the strategy was related to increased achievement in your class, and a positive effect may be seen in other classes. That's exactly what you want to see in research, which is fantastic. So one thing we'll say, the sample was small. Like she said, it was just a couple of classes, but still, it's very rare that you see a high effect size of 0.97, a significant positive impact like 0.97 in educational research. So if you look at this, and I'm not going to take a lot of time to go over this, but at the bottom of this, 0.20 is small effect in education. 0.5 is moderate. Anything 0.80 or over is large. And this was 0.97. So that's very large. So again, it's a small group. You don't want to put too much into it, but I'd say that the recommendation from a research perspective would be for other classes to use that same approach. And again, see if you continue to find these findings, because that is, again, significant. So again, kudos to Pinellas and really to all of our participants. These districts, as you can hear, really took the evidence-based approaches that Lori and I shared and ran with them in many ways, and really are finding success in different ways. And they're in different places like everyone is, but we've just been so pleased to work with them. So we wanted to leave a few moments to open up for Q&A, and we're glad again to hear from you. And definitely great job, Pinellas County. That was, again, it's outstanding to see that kind of effect size. So it's open now, and I know, I believe Ron and Brian have been answering questions and sending documents out. It looks like we have a couple of other questions in there. So I'll just leave that. If there are two questions currently in the queue, one is any recommendation on retention strategies, especially to get students to the 12-hour milestone. So anyone who is part of this group want to share anything about that, or maybe someone's already answered it?
I see there's a couple of questions from Melissa Perry. Sure, I'd be glad to share the strategies that we use. The ESL classrooms used a little different goal setting thing, but yeah, Melissa, I'd be glad to send that to you.
Perfect. And Brian has mentioned to incorporate class and program promises and expectations during intake, making those connections as well. So thank you. I think, certainly that'll be helpful and to send. And Brian, thank you so much for your response as well.
And I'm going to add to the responses here just to get the students to the 12-hour threshold so that we can get credit for those students. What we try to do is especially in an open enrollment setting, it can come in at any time. It has been truly a challenge. What we do is with the help of a teacher aide and also consultation with the teacher, what we do is we structure the first 2 to 3 meetings of that student to be strictly catered to that student's goal. So we can bring in tutors, we will bring in aides to provide, to do some diagnostics, and also even going in depth in interviewing the student as to how we can make the best, make the adult education program the best so that we can communicate it to the teacher even prior to them stepping in. We will pull out the student every now and then to make sure that everything is okay. And if there's any particular barrier that they're experiencing or they're going to anticipate experiencing in the near future, that we address it right away before it happens. So there is no break in that student's attendance and that the first 12 hours is straight. So we also schedule some welcoming activities for the students so they feel that they are welcome in our district, and we want to make sure that the student has everything, the tools. They have a loan if they need a laptop or a computer to take home to participate virtually, that they have all the tools necessary for that. And we also hold a lot of events actually within those first few meetings. So of course, what we do is we strategically hold events throughout the school year and not only at the beginning of the school year, because of the fact that we are in an open entry. And so at any point in time, the student that comes in can experience one of the other support services that we're doing in our district, such as vaccination, such as CPR training, other things such as workplace readiness trainings that we do on the side with the students to make sure that we are supporting them in their career and employment goals.
Excellent. Thanks, Ron. And so a couple people wanting to know, and Ann put her email in the chat, if they can get the documents, the PDF documents that Ron had mentioned, and the goal setting and best practices documents that Ann mentioned. So Ann, it looks like if you email Ann, or emails in the chat, she'll be glad to send those out. And Ron, for the documents you sent, I know you were quietly kind of sending those, it looked like, through email. Any recommendations there for anyone?
Yes, so I also included my email into the chat. So if you need that document, I can email you. And what we can do is maybe we can post it into the webinar landing page, in addition to the handouts or the slides that you included, Kevin, that we can add those handouts that we have as well.
Perfect. That sounds
We
like
just need to give us about 24 to 48 hours to get it posted into the webinar landing page.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ron. Another question came in. Any recommendations to upscale retention strategies in math? So from any of our districts, any thoughts regarding that?
Well, that's really my forte right here, because I'm a math teacher. What we do is we don't want to put the students right away into a math class that say, okay, a student walks in to register for an ABE math or even a GED prep math class. We don't want to slide them right away into the teacher and start instructing them, because they could end up going and walking into a class where the teacher is teaching inequalities and the students is at the level that they're not ready. So we want to make sure that we put the student on a fast track remediation type of class, where we're going to cover, and the aide will cover the different things that may have been covered in class, and give them preparation to what they're going to encounter as they enter this teacher's classroom. So at least when they walk in there, they're not like, oh my God, I don't know what this is. I'm completely lost, even though it's not really their fault that they're lost, because of the fact that they're just coming into such a difficult topic in math. Having those tutors and homework help and all those little support services would help math retention so much. In addition to, again, contextualizing everything that's research-based, that we know are good in best practices in math. But I just went over some of those support services and those little intervention strategies that we put in place, so that students are not quite as shocked entering into the math class.
Perfect. Thanks, Ron. And Kiefer mentions any retention suggestions for ABE, GED students in prison. That's what my sister does. And I'll just say quickly, goal setting is really important, especially for that population. So whatever you can do to focus on goals and cost benefit, and just, figure out where they want to go in the long term, I think is going to be most beneficial. And we will get to the survey in just a second. So I'm gonna, we just have a couple of minutes left. One last question I see is, with scheduling class schedules and locations, how do you balance meeting student demand and preferences with what is fiscally and programmatically possible? It can be challenging to create marketing materials with an accurate menu of class options when decisions must be made about which classes to run and which to close or alter due to low enrollment. And that is that's probably a very big question for our districts in particular. Any thoughts from either Ann, Brian, or Ron?
So my quick suggestion here, especially for those, is to go online. Online is the cheapest and fastest way to disseminate information as to what programs are being open or in the process of being closed. Using those communication software such as Remind, WhatsApp, what we try to do is, during intake, we collect some social media information from the students, so that we can blast and they can be included in the email blast or the postings that may be relevant to them. Maybe join the Hillsborough County Public Schools Adult Education Facebook group, or maybe adding in their telephone number into a particular WhatsApp group for that teacher. So that's applies really well, especially in a large county like us, or even in a small county that is very remote to each other. So we found that very helpful.
Perfect. And we have one final question, I think, from Melissa. What's the main takeaway you want us to have from this presentation? It's my favorite question as well. I mean, I think from everything I've heard from the districts and from my knowledge and what we've learned about research in this area, focusing on retention and persistence, it has to be intentional, that you have to come up with a plan. It has to be agreed upon and collaborative, and then you have to implement it. And it takes time. It's not going to be an immediate fix. Very little that works well is. So I think we've given, again, hopefully you'll see some good strategies. Pick some that work well for your location, collaborate with your crew, and find out, again, what would work well, and take some time to implement it well.
I'm going to add to that, Kevin, that the bottom line is really addressing that need of the student. I know we have programs that we have to follow, we have curriculums we have to implement, we have policies that we have to abide by. Making sure that in the definition and in the implementation of those policies, guidelines, and procedure, that the student is always at the center. And we are trying to be as flexible as possible to make sure that we are addressing every need and eliminating every possible barrier to participation for that student, and putting them on the right track towards success, and showing them that, hey, this is not very hard to attain. With a lot of persistence and dedication, your goal is right within reach. So that's really my kind of like parting message to everyone that in this webinar, to make sure that always make the student at the center of all your decision making.
Always good advice. Thanks so much, Ron.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Before you leave us, please answer these 3 short questions that are on the screen right now. Your feedback is so important to us. And as you fill that out, I want to remind you that next week our webinar will be about blended learning. So it's leveraging blended learning in adult education post-COVID. So we hope you can join us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, have a great rest of your evening, and thanks so much for being here with us today.